Do you know how many millions of dollars of fucking HEX I've seen people sell over the last 2 weeks? Millions and millions and millions and millions. And we see where the money goes. We see where the money goes. But your brain doesn't understand it. We see with our eyes where the money goes when people sell their fucking HEX. People dump the HEX price constantly, all the time. But because the demand exceeds the supply, the price keeps going up and people keep dumping it and they dump it and they empty their fucking wallets. And it doesn't matter because the god whale who's buying it has more money than all their little pleb bags put together.
Hey y'all, it's Crypto Bo, and today I'm doing what I hope is the last video I will ever do on HEX, Pulse, and PulseChain. I've spent over 100 hours reading, listening, watching, just all kinds of HEX content, and let me tell you, it is fucking toxic, buddy. Long and short of it is that HEX is an ERC20 token that is controlled almost entirely by a handful of billionaires. And those billionaires have concocted a scheme by which they can avoid taxes, launder money, and hopefully trick a lot of rubes out of giving them money. They achieve this with a almost religious zeal, and their followers become acolytes and proselytizers themselves. So if you have heard of HEX, welcome. I love you, I promise, despite all the shit I'm about to talk about your community. And if you haven't heard of HEX, good, run away, turn off this video right now. Because I'm diving deep directly into the mouth of Richard Heart. Now, HEX has been around for a couple of years, but I had not heard of it until summer of last year. I was driving from Oregon back to New York City, and one of my followers commented on one of my videos asking me what my thought was on HEX. And so I went to hex.com, where they advertise 40% APY year over year, every year, for locking up your funds, what they call the world's first crypto CD, certificate of deposit. And so I saw the website and I was like, oh yeah, this is a fucking scam. And so I put out a video where I called it a Ponzi scheme, or at least a rug pull. And to be fair to the Hexicans, that was not entirely true. And I must apologize because it is not a Ponzi scheme or a rug pull. It is so much more complicated than that. Like I said, it looks a lot more like a religion than it does like your traditional like Ponzi scheme. And in that religion, Richard Heart is a messianic figure.
Richard, I hereby declare you king of all Jews. You are the smartest and most productive person in the world.
That's actually just one of many things that people say about Richard Heart in his live streams, where they fawn over him, call him the smartest and most gracious and most generous person of all time, and he repays them with little nuggets of wisdom like this.
Roll up, suck balls.
Or this.
Suck my balls. How does that sound, buddy? Suck them. Get them furries right in your mouth, you little piece of crap. I don't work for you. You're welcome.
Thanks, Richard. Sometimes he even quotes the Bible directly, like here where he quotes from Mark chapter 3, verses 6 through 9.
What is this? Fag chat?
It's a very short series of verses. Richard couches a lot of what he says in overtly religious symbolism, which makes a lot of sense because, as he says himself,
No. I grew up a Jehovah's Witness. I know how it goes.
So he grew up in Florida as a Jehovah's Witness, which is why a lot of his rhetoric takes on this very religious tone, and not even religious in the purest sense, but he sounds a lot like a televangelist often.
No, I do not. And don't you ever say I did.
So, for instance, when he's talking about how he must save his people.
I got to save these people's followers. These people are being led to slaughter by the people that they think are trying to help them. So the only way I can get in front of their audience is by pushing hard.
What can I do to save my people? In order to save my people, I need to get these fees down.
In order to save my people, I need to get these fees down, which is why PulseChain is a fork of Ethereum that is basically Binance Smart Chain. It runs on a proof of authority consensus mechanism, which is much less decentralized and means that there will only be about 33 elected validators on the network, but it means that fees will be incredibly low. Personally, I think it's because it's very hard to on-ramp a poor person to a scam where they have to pay $60 just in fees to get in. We'll get to the technical details of Pulse versus Ethereum, PulseX versus Uniswap later on. But for now, let's focus on what Richard Heart is saving people from. First, he says he's saving people from high fees, which is why he had to make PulseChain. But also, he's saving people from scammers.
It's very hard to market against scammers because they have infinite profit margins since they're just scamming. They get the money and they don't have actual costs of performing actual business. So, in my opinion, the correct way, the scalable way to have maximum impact to prevent people from being scammed is to get everyone invested into things that are awesome so that their money is not sitting there to get them scammed out of.
Now, Richard says this in interviews all the time, that the SEC sucks and doesn't have enough money to go after fraudsters, that it doesn't make sense to just educate people because it takes 10 units of effort in order to disprove 1 unit of falsehoods given by scammers, which maybe this video is evidence of, but regardless, the third argument he makes is that the only way to really save people from scammers is to make something else and make it good, but also market it like a scam, because if you keep their money in a place where they can't touch it, then they won't have any money to get scammed with.
Imagine if there was a product that you could buy it and it would stop your weak-handed ass from selling your future. And then you would have the most price-performant asset in the world still in your hands because you didn't sell it in a 2X when it did a 6,000X.
It's something he doesn't often say unless he's very angry, but what he is usually trying to communicate is that you are too dumb to make investment decisions yourself. He, however, is one of the smartest men to have ever lived, and he's made millions and billions of dollars, and he has a giant cock. So you should listen to him, because otherwise your weak-handed ass would just lose all your money. And Richard doesn't do this for himself.
I want to make the world a better place.
He wants to make the world a better place for everyone.
Particularly parts that I live in. I want the world that I get to experience to be a better place.
Okay, well, not everyone, but anybody who's him.
Favorite person on the planet? I'm going to say me.
It becomes incredibly apparent the more and more you watch Richard Hart that he really only cares about himself. He says that he gives people out free books and free YouTube videos, that he makes price calls for free, but it feels like all that does is serve the narrative that he is the greatest person alive and that everybody should listen to him and invest in the things that he builds.
I've got $3 million of watches sitting here. I got the best speakers, best TV, best blah, blah, blah. What am I really doing with that money? For me, it's glory. I'm in this to win.
See, for him, it's just all about the glory. He wants the adulation. He wants the worship. He wants the followers. He thinks that that's what brings him power. I got into cryptocurrency because I like the idea of democratizing power in general. I didn't like these centralized powers that exerted so much control over our lives, told us who we could transact with, who we could speak with. And when I first discovered Bitcoin, I thought it was a truly liberatory technology.
Yeah, I'm in this for the tech too, bro. I'm in this to save the poor people of Africa. That's what I'm in it for. No, that's not why anyone's in this stuff, man. We all know why we're here.
And that's the thing. Richard Hart has never been a technologist. He might know how to code now, and he might know how to audit smart contracts, but those skills have only ever served the purpose of personally enriching him. They are only as useful insofar as they make him rich. And boy, is he f***ing rich.
Let me look up what this shirt cost. Gucci jean jacket.
$3,000 suit. Come on.
Yeah, this is 2,000 euros. You might not want to. You might not want to buy this $3,000 shirt. This is a very expensive shirt. Love your watch collection. You're humble. Oh, I'm very humble, aren't I? I'm so humble. I tell you the prices of all this stuff right under the video because that's what people care about. Like fake humility. I mean, look, I am super humble, right? I'm a fat old dude that's funny and rich and has a big wiener.
See, I told you he had a huge dick.
Yeah.
And you know he has a huge
Johnson. Yes, sir.
because he told you so. And all he wants is you to worship that giant.
Wang. Pay attention.
But be careful, because watch what happens when one of his followers don't sufficiently worship him.
Like, this begging crap, I don't like it. It offends me. You should say thank you, like everyone else in chat, instead of begging for more.
He's done so much for you. The audacity to ask for more when he's already given you so much. And look, that's not to say that Richard's followers are not very important to him. They are, and I think that he genuinely cares a lot about them, but only insofar as they are useful to him as evangelists, because any good religion needs evangelists.
Please let the good people know that outbound messaging is the best thing anyone can do for HEX and PulseChain. I agree with what he's saying. Thanks, Latin American crypto. Yes, outbound messaging is king. Richard, do you still believe advertising the best hope of mass adoption? Yes, I do. Outbound messaging is the most important thing we can do. Onboarding new users has a massive compound effect. Agree, Crypto Ewok. What would you like to see done to improve HEX? More outbound messaging, more on-ramping new users, and you guys building infrastructure around HEX. The Crypto Sparbook guys from Germany flew to America to tour city by city. They had to fly from a whole nother country and speak in not their native languages to go educate Americans. Come on, Americans. You should be doing the stuff that they're doing. You should be traveling around teaching people and spreading the good word.
Traveling around teaching people spreading the good word. This is basically the Great Commission. I mean, that's what Jesus says to his followers in Matthew. And right there, Jesus, like Richard Hart, is saying, we need more followers, get more people in on this. And whereas Jesus was selling people like eternal life after death, Richard Hart is just selling people tokens, which to be fair is a lot more tangible, but maybe not as impactful. But this is what makes Hex a religion, or as Tone Vase put it, an affinity scam. Now, I don't think the analogy of an affinity scam is perfect, just like the analogy of a Ponzi scheme is not perfect. But in an affinity scam, there is a charismatic leader who sells to their followers something of absolutely no value, which their followers imbue in value because they hold the charismatic leader in such high regard. And I think Richard Hart knows that his fate is tied to the fate of his community. And he says as much here.
But what are you most proud of?
I think the community.
Oh, yeah.
Because the community
Great answer.
is who is on-ramping all of the users.
Absolutely.
The community is the reason the price has done what it has done.
Yep.
This is not, I'm not paying for any ads. I'm not paying for anything.
And you see, in this world, Richard Hart doesn't have to pay for anything. He just tells his followers to go and on-ramp new users, because if they on-ramp new users, then the demand increases. And if the demand for the coin increases, it means that their bags get pumped. So it's this self-fulfilling prophecy where people buy in, end up having a stake in the currency itself, and thus go and evangelize other people to try and pump the value of the currency even more. And here's an example of the community talking about what might happen if the price of Hex were to crash to 7 cents.
My onwards are going to cry so hard if it goes to 7 cents.
Right? Your recent onboards?
Yeah, welcome to crypto, bitch.
That's right. Make sure the minimum stake is 2 years.
Make sure their minimum stake is 2 years. Or if they just need the money. If things go south and someone goes to the hospital or someone loses a job, don't let their weak-handed ass get out. But it's not just religious symbolism and rhetoric that Richard Hart uses to convince people to be part of his scam. He also uses political rhetoric.
And it's really to make a political statement that you support free speech. It's a protected human right, and blockchains are speech.
Wait a minute.
So a little bit of explanation. Like I said before, Hex is an ERC20 token, which means it exists on the Ethereum blockchain. And right now, the Ethereum blockchain has high fees. And so in order to save his followers from those fees, Richard Hart has dedicated himself to making a brand new blockchain, which is itself just a copy and paste of Ethereum, and a brand new exchange, which is itself just a copy and paste of Uniswap. So they Control-C, Control-V'd Uniswap and Ethereum, and now Richard Hart is about to release in the next 2 to 3 months, which has been the next 2 to 3 months for the last 6 months, but eventually there will be a new chain called Pulse. And last year, people sacrificed their money for freedom of speech, not to help the development of Pulse. Don't you even suggest that it was meant to help the development of Pulse. No. This is for freedom of speech. What are they going to do for freedom of speech?
I don't want to have these convos on Twitter because I don't want to get cancel cultured. So,
that's fine. I don't want to get cancel cultured either. And Richard, I don't want you to get cancel cultured. So let's not even talk about what it is that you're going to do for freedom of speech. I just think it's a little strange because when I was being interviewed on Discourse Syndicate, I was seeing the chat being actively moderated and people were getting banned for saying that they supported the point that I was making or agreed with me. I've also seen people get banned from the Hex subreddit and the Hex Telegram. In fact, I see a lot of people get banned from your stream.
If you are so good, oh, this guy's about to get banned, I can tell. Here we go. Just say you were wrong, big guy. Lol, it's okay. Click hide user from channel. Bye-bye. Here's a stupid question, right? What if someone copies everything you do and does it better? Hide user on channel. You know what? I'm just going to give you the old hide user on this channel. Bye-bye. See you later, dum-dum. I do not advocate or advertise or allow to even be talked about in my chat other projects. Now, what if my chat was just all about those projects? Would that make my life better? Would that make our ticker symbols go up more? I don't think so.
But that's fine. I mean, the internet is a nasty place, and so I get it. Sometimes you gotta ban users, sometimes you gotta moderate your chat. Not everybody has the best intentions. It seems like you're really just banning people because you think they're dumb or annoying, which I don't know if is really in the spirit of freedom of speech, but I'm sure you have some sort of plan for what we can do for freedom of speech, freedom of movement, especially with all these billions of dollars that have been sacrificed to support these causes.
What do you think Hexicans can use their wealth to collectively make meaningful political changes? Hey, I have an idea. Why don't you work on fiat on-ramps first? Every human being in the United States should be able to buy with their bank wires or with cash, Pulse, PulseX, HEX, now.
You see, Richard doesn't actually care about freedom of speech. Well, I mean, I'm sure he does, like in sort of some... But the sacrifice for Pulse was not about freedom of speech. He has no plans to further freedom of speech in this weird abstract sense. It's just a way to appeal to a different user base.
Basically, you're lucky I don't ban you. But I won't ban you for that. Maybe you'll say something useful later.
Appreciate it, Richard, but I promise not to say anything useful at all. So why even say it's for freedom of speech? And I think the reason gets to the heart of why Hex, Pulse, and PulseX are so insidious. And that is really just a large mechanism for incredibly rich people to launder their money and evade taxes. I mean, this is Hex first principles.
So HEX was designed to avoid a lot of regulatory pitfalls.
Say anything you want about Richard Hart, but he is a very careful person. And he takes great pains not to implicate himself in any sort of securities fraud. Take this example, for instance.
Hey, Richard, would you support a community-funded advertising push across Facebook and Instagram to help get the word out? Define support. I like it when you guys advertise. Is that the kind of support you're looking for?
He won't monetarily or even commit to the idea of supporting any sort of advertising push because he himself is not personally responsible for the project, and he wants to make that incredibly clear because...
Furthermore, there's this little thing in the United States called securities laws. And quick refresher on them, if you give money to a common pool with the expectation of profit solely from the work of others, and or there is essential managerial or entrepreneurial effort, then you might have a security, and that's a regulated activity. And so in anything that I do, you must have no expectation of profit from the work of others, period. Or you might have a security, and I'm not licensed to be issuing securities. So it's very important that people understand that when they sacrifice, they're doing it to support something that is a political speech issue. And if they happen to get a free token airdrop, congrats.
So Richard Hart, although being clearly the face of the Hexican community, Pulse and PulseX, you should have absolutely no expectations of him. And he serves absolutely no essential managerial role. And this idea that we have to avoid government overreach, the SEC has sort of gone crazy, so we have to design things so that we can avoid these sorts of regulations and that we can pass the Howey test and everything like that, gives Richard Hart cover when talking to his community as to why he controls so much of the Hex currency and of the Pulse and PulseX currency. Because Richard Hart likely controls the origin address, which has over 50% of the entire Hex supply, the sacrifice address for Pulse, which has over $27 billion in it, and the sacrifice address for PulseX, which right now has about $1 billion in it. Why was he given all this control? Because people expect him to continue acting like this.
And what is the last sacrifice phase done with the Hex? Just sat on it, didn't sell it. So aren't you very lucky that there appears to be some address which just absorbs Hex and doesn't dump it? Now, hey, no crystal ball, right? But the chain analysis shows that the origin address has never sold a Hex and that the sacrifice address has never sold a Hex. So aren't you really, really, really happy, thank your lucky stars, that there's something out there rewarding you in a way entirely different from everything else that was sacrificed? Because the chain analysis would show that the vast, vast, vast majority of everything else sacrificed was turned into stablecoins.
And this is an important point, because notice people sacrificed a lot of their money for Pulse and PulseX. And those sacrifice addresses were still active, someone had control of them, and they used it to convert a lot of the other currencies, things like Ethereum and ERC20 tokens like Uni and MKR, whatever people were sacrificing were converted into USDC, depressing the price of those assets. But the address never sold Hex, and probably will never sell Hex, because if it were to sell that amount of Hex, it would drive down the price of Hex, and that would not be good for Hexicans. So aren't you lucky that there is something out there that just absorbs Hex and does nothing with it because it just wants to make the world a better place?
Apparently, the largest whales in this ecosystem prefer to let everyone make very high APY and have a higher market cap to on-ramp new users.
The very largest whales in this ecosystem prefer to allow people to have a high APY and a high market cap in order to on-ramp new users. So he basically admits that he and a handful of billionaires are manipulating the price up so that more people will join. And what is their long-term plan? Well, if HEX eventually reaches this point where there is legitimacy and there is enough liquidity that they can actually cash out some of these billions of dollars that they're currently sitting on their hands with. They can't stake it and earn rewards, because if they did, then it would drive down the rewards for everyone else and they wouldn't have as good of a marketing pitch, and they can't sell it because that would drive down the price, and if it drove down the price, then people would no longer buy it. So the economics of HEX revolve entirely around their ability to market it to new users, which is why a lot of people say that it looks so much like a Ponzi scheme. And yes, it is true that anything viewed from high enough up looks like a Ponzi scheme, including the US dollar and Bitcoin, but this one really looks like a Ponzi scheme. And I think it's because the vast majority of the wealth is concentrated in so few hands. Not only that, but there's this added level of obfuscation with HEX, where we don't really know who the participants are. We know that there are several very wealthy individuals, but we don't know which wallets are theirs or how many wallets they control, including the origin wallet.
Who's the origin address then?
Nobody knows.
It was obviously you.
If you say so.
But
a lot of people think that.
Do you not think that that's a concern though? If the origin address is you and 50% of HEX went to you, then people are going to question, why has it gone to you?
So you would prefer the founder not own any of the company?
See right there, which is it? Is it that he doesn't control over 50% of the supply of HEX, or is it that he deserves to control over 50% of the supply of HEX because he's the founder and he deserves that much money? Oh, you'd prefer the founder have none? Well, that's how it is, because I don't have control of the origin. Like, what fucking is it?
There's nobody with more transparent trading than us.
Of the origin wallet?
I would never tell you that. Never.
Okay. Do you have control of any daughter or son or sibling wallets?
I would never tell you that.
Okay.
By the way, I would suggest that no one ever talk about their crypto balances that they hold. So I also won't tell you about any Bitcoin I may or may not hold. I won't tell you about any Ethereum I may or may not hold. I won't tell you about any stables I may or may not hold.
But I'm for financial privacy of individuals, not financial privacy for people with incredible amounts of power. By this, like, he's basically saying what Nancy Pelosi said. Yeah, Congress should be able to trade the stock market. It's a free market. Not only that, but we should be able to do it anonymously. Even they aren't able to do it anonymously. There has to be some disclosure. But that's the thing, is like this person, Richard Hart, who controls billions and billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars of this cryptocurrency, who could tank the price in an instant if he wanted to. You know, we just have to trust that he won't. We don't need to know how much money he has. We don't need to know how much control he has over this ecosystem. Whereas I think that these are incredibly important questions. And when you have a position of that much power, it demands even more in transparency and accountability. Because how much longer will it be true that
the largest whales in this ecosystem prefer to let everyone make very high APY and have a higher market cap to on-ramp new users?
At what point have they onboarded enough users and they decide it's time to get out? I think that we should know who these people are so that if it happens, we can hold them accountable. Unless all of this is just a scam to further enrich those already uber rich people while they feel little to no accountability for it. And they make sure to tell you to have absolutely no expectation that they have any level of responsibility for their grotesque wealth. And don't worry, because you're gonna get an airdrop of free ERC20 tokens. And if you have Ethereum in a wallet, you're going to get Pulse too. But there's a catch.
Now Ethereum holders are getting PulseChain for free, but there's a trick here. The ERC20 guys are getting a free ride. No dilution, no inflation. But the Ethereum guys are not getting a free ride. They're getting diluted over 1,000,000x. So everyone's going to have enough Pulse to transact on the network and swap their ERC20s around and stuff. But the Ethereum guys aren't going to be dumping on our heads because they have less than 1,000,000th of the supply. Oh, I design good stuff, don't I? Yes, very, very smart.
But it's only smart for Richard Hart and his handful of billionaires that control the vast majority of power in this ecosystem. And let me explain why. These people that hold an incredible amount of HEX, let's say billions of dollars of HEX, cannot sell billions of dollars worth of HEX. And now you may have heard this argument before that there just like isn't enough volume or liquidity, and maybe you think that that's bullshit, but think about about it. There's currently around $40 million in total liquidity for HEX on Uniswap, which means about the most HEX you could sell is $20 million. Now, HEX theoretically has a market cap in the hundreds of billions of dollars. So what happens if one of those people want to sell a lot of HEX? Well, they can't. But what they can do is sacrifice it. See, the way the initial Pulse sacrifice and the current PulseX sacrifice work is the more money you give into the sacrifice address marked at the current market rate, you get points, which will then award you Pulse and PulseX when the networks go live. You're essentially buying these coins now to be rewarded with when the network eventually releases.
And you're not buying. You're sacrificing your money and losing it. And if you happen to get some free coin that is free, congrats.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. I forgot.
So HEX was designed to avoid a lot of regulatory pitfalls.
And this is just one of those regulatory pitfalls that HEX is designed to avoid. Because you're not actually buying anything with your money. You are sacrificing your money. You're losing it, which is technically a capital loss, which Richard Hart mentions in other interviews has great tax implications. And then you are being given something for free. You are being given Pulse and PulseX for free, which means that it is not taxed until you sell it. So for instance, if you were to sacrifice, let's say, $27 billion worth of HEX, you would be losing that. That's a capital loss that you can then apply to this year's taxes as well as future year's taxes. And then you'll be being given, maybe for free, something of commensurate value that is not actually value and is not taxed until you sell it, if you ever sell it. And that's exactly what happened in the first Pulse sacrifice. There's $27 billion worth of HEX sitting in that address, which, as Richard Hart mentioned, is never going to be sold, but also didn't have to be sold in order to be credited the value of $27 billion. Like I said before, you cannot sell $27 billion worth of HEX, not for USDC, not for Ether, not for anything. The most you can sell is maybe, let's say, $30 million. But when you sacrifice it, you end up with an incredible amount of control over the Pulse chain. But what is going to happen is these handful of billionaires that sacrifice together $27 billion of HEX for Pulse chain will end up with an outsized control over Pulse chain that they never had to sell their HEX for. Because they're the billionaires who hold the most of it, they're artificially inflating the price by keeping market depth low and not selling any of their bags, but then they get to benefit from that artificially high price when calculating how much Pulse they will be given by the sacrifice address. And the same thing is happening right now with PulseX. Notice $540 million worth of HEX are sacrificed in this address. $540 million that could not be sold on the open market, that is manipulated by a handful of billionaires to be higher than it should be, who will then have the vast controlling share of PulseX. And they'll probably do the same thing. They probably won't sell any of their shit and they'll manipulate the price even higher, and then eventually they'll sell 2-3 years down the line. And I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what's in their mind. And here's another fun anecdote. Remember when Richard Hart said earlier that you'd be given all your ERC20 tokens on the Pulse chain because it's just a fork of Ethereum?
I mean, Hexo just yesterday said, oh, it's going to be cool that the sacrifice address gets a copy on Pulse. I was like, never thought of that. It literally never even occurred to me.
So those billions and billions of dollars that were given to both the sacrifice for Pulse address and the sacrifice for Pulse chain address will just have all those balances doubled on the Pulse chain because it's just a fork where it's going to end up with all that money anyway. And Richard Hart's going to have even more power over this ecosystem. And I'm not saying it's a scam. I'm not saying it's a bad investment. I'm not even saying what they're doing is illegal because I don't know that it is. What I'm saying is that if you were invested in HEX, Pulse, and PulseX, you trust Richard Hart. You have to. There's no other way than to trust Richard Hart. And cryptocurrency is all about disintermediating trust. It's about trustless, decentralized networks. And as soon as there is this figure who is central to the operation of this ecosystem, and he has this incredible amount of power which has been bestowed upon him by all of his followers and by nature of the fact that he controls all this money, you have to trust him. And I don't trust him.
There's no in-production bridge in the world that doesn't have admin keys or something similar. Doesn't exist. We've searched high and low. So if it's ever going to exist, we might have to build it ourselves. And since it's not smart to delay getting to market, you're better off getting to market and fixing it later. For the same reasons that everyone else is enjoying the gains that they made by doing that.
And that last clip is a great example of why. Richard Hart is consistently prioritizing profit over the safety of the ecosystem. The idea that people should be able to bridge in their assets from Ethereum, and that bridge is going to have admin keys, and that is a failure point that they haven't figured out yet, but they're going to go to market because it doesn't make sense to figure that out, even though it might be a security risk before going to market because everybody else is already making money, is not a development and engineering philosophy that I subscribe to. Also, second thing that's interesting to note, it sounded to me like he said he had a go-to-market strategy, which sounds to me kind of like
There's essential managerial or entrepreneurial effort.
I mean, I don't know. I'm not the SEC.
Your boyfriend slapped your little hater mouth too hard, made your eyes tear up. Not the SEC.
That's what I just said. But it's like I said at the beginning of this video. Richard Hart wants to convince you that you are too dumb to understand what is and is not a good investment, and that he knows better than you, and that the only thing that you should be thinking about is building fiat on-ramps so more and more people can be saved from those evil gold investors. Because what Richard says goes, and he's the smartest man on earth. And
when there's something that I want you to know about, I'm going to tell you.
And that is the God's honest truth. When there's something Richard Hart wants you to know about, he will tell you. Like maybe the fact that he has a giant
Pecker!
Oh, yeah. But my point in all of this is not to say that you're dumb if you've invested in HEX, or that you're dumb if you've sacrificed for Pulse or PulseX. Richard Hart's a very charismatic character, and throughout this research process, I found myself questioning whether or not HEX was a good investment time and time and time again, even after realizing that it was literally just a way for billionaires to launder their money and evade tax.
Delete that footage.
I honestly still wonder some days whether or not buying HEX right now is a good idea, because it might be. Like maybe these billionaires are just jacking up the price to ultimately rug pull everyone, or at least get the sort of exit velocity so that they have exit liquidity.
Coincidence? I think not!
But that doesn't mean that in the short term, it's not a good thing I won't get mad gains, because I might. But my point is that all that Richard Hart is doing is replicating the old system. He's like Democrats who said that they wanted to defund the police, but they didn't actually want to defund the police. They just wanted to be the police. Richard Hart's a person that says he wants to get rid of the banks, but doesn't really want to get rid of the banks. He's just mad at them that they're not him. He wants to be the banks. He like Crypto.com or Nexo or Celsius, just the next iteration of the same. And so if you want to support a better world where a handful of billionaires are still in control of fucking everything, it's just a different set of billionaires, then go ahead, invest in Pulse, invest in HEX, watch Richard Hart's live streams, buy his free books, but I will not, because if this is how we win, then I don't really want to. Play us out, Richard.
But since you're player hating, maybe it's because I got a few $1 million of watches behind me, maybe it's because I said I had a big PP, or maybe it's because I founded cryptocurrencies worth billions and billions and billions of dollars. I don't know. Maybe for those reasons you feel like taking me down a notch. It ain't very Christmas-like, but that's fine. Click hide user on channel.